Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, Black and Blue. Two journalists preview a summer of primary election battles for legislative seats between moderate Democratic incumbents and progressive insurgent candidates. And
so this is not bootstraps, right? This is how do we use state government to give people dignity in making their own financial decisions that improve their lives.
building wealth through education. The new executive director for the nonprofit New Mexico Voices for Children tells us how financial literacy programs can help fight child poverty. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm executive producer Jeff Proctor, and we've got a busy show. Senior producer Lou DeVizio sits down with both chairwomen of Albuquerque's Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Commission to discuss the group's first year. Then, correspondent Antonia Gonzalez looks back at 20 years of UNM's Native American Studies Department with a professor and an alumna. They discuss the program and its impacts in local and national Indigenous communities. We close our program with correspondent Russell Contreras interviewing Gabrielle Ubaez, the new executive director of the nonprofit New Mexico Voices for Children. Child poverty has been a problem in this state for decades, but Ubaez brought a hopeful message to our studio this week. But we began with a look to the Democratic primary elections for legislative seats this June. There's a battle underway for control of the New Mexico Democratic Party as progressives attempt to oust centrist incumbents this summer. In a special political roundtable, I sit down with Source New Mexico editor Sean Griswold and freelance reporter Justin Horwath, who are documenting the ensuing Blue Party brawl. Sean, welcome back to New Mexico in Focus. Justin, I can't believe I've had this job for 14 months and this is the first time I've had you on the show. Thanks very much to both of you for coming today. So we're going to talk about the potential for a leftward shift in the New Mexico Democratic Party, what that means policy-wise for the people who live in this state, and also a little bit about journalism. How should we be covering the business of elected officials and what is increasingly becoming a one-party state? Let's start with the politics, and let's use Justin's recent story for New Mexico in Depth as the frame. I'm going to read a little bit from the top of the piece, starting with the headline, which I'd like to note did not lack spice. Progressives going after incumbents in hot Democratic primaries. Okay then. Justin reports that Democrats are extremely likely to keep their huge majorities in both chambers of the legislature, but there's a fight brewing during primary season between progressives and moderate incumbents. And here's the money shot from Justin's story. Quote, because of this one-party dominance, the ideological fault lines within the Democratic Party have major policy implications on abortion, the environment, education, and workplace issues like minimum wage and paid family and medical leave benefits. Justin, let's start with you. What are the real stakes of this election for people who live in New Mexico? How will people feel it in their lives if the progressives pick up some seats?
I think it's all the policies that you listed off. The split within the Democratic Party is interesting because it is a difference over policies. And a lot of times you see intra-party battles where there might be a little bit of personality involved. And here, there is a huge split within kind of the progressive organizing community that, they're demanding paid family and medical leave, environmental protections, and, any kind of those policies. And I think that a lot of this is just a big policy dispute within the Democratic Party.
Interesting. Sean, let's kick it to you, but kind of in the inverse. If the moderates hold some of these seats and the balance within the party sort of remains in the legislature, how will people who live here feel that in their everyday lives? What will be different for them?
Yeah, some of it might actually be very much the same. And I think that when we talk about the primary or the election, I think we have to look at the primary, which is going to be next week, first week of May. Early voting begins in New Mexico. So when we're talking about the election, we're talking about this. General election in November, a lot of these races we're seeing either in the state house or in the state senate, and as Justin's reporting is pointing towards, are going to be settled ahead of November. So right now, this is probably the most important time for local New Mexican voters to have a voice in the legislature in how their state government's going to work, because as you all both mentioned, as Justin's reporting points to, Democrats are going to maintain their majority in the Senate and the House. They're going to have another year with Michelle Lujan Grisham. So it's going to be a Democratic run at the Roundhouse. So what's going to be most impactful for voters is, one, you're going to continue to see some of the similar policies and legislative stuff that we've seen over the past several years, where Democrats present a list of proposals and agendas. Several of them will make it through into laws. Republicans will kind of put up a little fight here and there, spend 3-4 hours filibustering, but then the Democrats will squash any opposition and pass it through to the governor. Within that, we're going to see a bit of a divide in the almost splitting hairs of the policy, where now we start to see the differences between how do you define a Democrat and what are Democratic policies? Because the Democrats in New Mexico run on multiple viewpoints. There's not a binary, like we're all in marching order towards one viewpoint and goal. Sure, we all want to help New Mexicans and protect everybody, and I think what Justin's reporting really shows us in the politics of it all is what those hairs are going to be split, and defining what is a progressive Democrat, what is a centrist Democrat, what's a New Mexican Democrat. So I think for the majority of it, we're going to see kind of how that is defined in New Mexico, and that's what New Mexico is going to play a role in.
And like, does it settle at some point is another question for me. But I want to move on to this, and I want to let you both kind of take a whack at this. As Justin reported, there have been progressive insurgencies in New Mexico for a long time. But what I'm interested in is what is driving it this time around. Do residents, do voters, do people who live here want the party to move left? Or is what we're seeing two different ideologies among elites arguing for like what the soul of the party should be? What's pushing this insurgency this time? We'll start with you, Justin.
I think after AOC was elected in, I think it was 2016, and she had upset somebody who'd been in Congress and had a lot of power for a long time, and her campaign served as a lot of inspiration for the progressive organizing community. I think that they are really getting their infrastructure together. As we reported, they kind of moved their money between PACs and different nonprofits and various groups. And, part of what they're doing is just getting people out in the streets and getting people advocating for their candidate, whoever that may be.
Sean, what are you guys seeing at source along those lines? What does it feel like this is an actual kind of grassroots thing that's asking the party to change or adopt kind of different philosophies, or is this more of a top-down kind of thing?
It is a power structure, and it's a little bit of both, but it's a power structure. Right now, progressive Democrats run it was one of the most powerful positions in New Mexico's House of Representatives, Javier Martinez from Albuquerque. And that progressive policies include, legalization of cannabis, regulations and enhancement to promote reproductive health services in the state, enhancing protections for workers, but also creating environmental protections on oil and gas industries. And that's where we begin to see a split. And this is what Justin's reporting really starts to show. Because Justin does the research and shows us, and we could talk, obviously we're talking about this later.
We'll get to the money in a second.
But the points that he hits on, it shows that the interests that come to who's giving money to which lawmakers or which candidates tells us where those splits we're seeing. And some of them do happen with oil and gas regulations and environmental concerns. So now we're seeing a bit of like progressive ideology is focused, and the progressive wing, as we're discussing here, does have identity in focusing on how do you regulate the environment, how do you regulate environmental protections, how do you regulate and provide services that the oil and gas industry can continue to keep it sort of boom. How are you going to protect the environment and ensure New Mexicans are safe from it? And I think that's where we're noticing a split. Justin's reporting shows that clearly too.
Yeah, and let's talk about the money for a second. First of all, I just want to say it's good to have you back reporting on New Mexico politics. Yeah. And in this story, in classic Horwath fashion and New Mexico in depth fashion, you focused on the money. And I don't want to get into the individual corporations necessarily, but give viewers a sense, if you could, of like who is funding these kind of two different philosophies and ideologies you wrote about.
If you're an incumbent in New Mexico, you're going to get corporate money, almost regardless of what your policy positions are. You get in office and that's the corporations are courting you. And these are some of the biggest corporations in the nation, in the world. They're Fortune 500 companies. And on, the challengers, the people who are challenging the incumbents, they don't have any corporate money really. They're getting their money from individual contributions is a big part of it, but also, and again, the progressives have always had this infrastructure of nonprofits, issues-based nonprofits. They could be in California, they could be in New Mexico, they could be anywhere, but they, they'll send money to these little tiny legislative races in New Mexico to affect policy.
Sean, what should voters make of where the money comes from along the sort of axis that Justin was just describing? Should it matter when you go and pull the lever in the ballot box, like whether it was Chevron or an individual contributor who funded the candidate?
For a voter, I think it's important to, at least the voters tell me, and as a voter myself, I can say that I am interested in understanding what are those interests the money is paying for? What is the influence that they're providing, that the access they're given? Are they having an influence on legislation, on laws that impact my everyday life? That's what I care most about, because I do know obviously money in politics is coming from everywhere, and if those interests, whether they originated in Morelos and Albuquerque, or they're from a place in California, New York, Texas, another state, because we see this on both factions of the parties here in New Mexico. Both Republican and Democrat have outside interest beyond the business interest which exists in New Mexico outside of its government. It really does depend on the philosophical ideas of, is that interest serving my life as a New Mexican? And what are my values for that? So that's why I think the environment is a continued split, because that is one of the true core values of what it is to be a New Mexican is, beautiful blue sky, the sunset, the mountains. And that's where at the core of it, we're also seeing that philosophical divide beyond just the politics here.
Yeah, and I'm glad we've teased that out a little bit, that where you really see the split is on environment issues and the way funding works for those. So I left some time at the end of this for the part of the conversation I'm most excited about. So lest the three of us come in for the proverbial lashing on Elon Musk's hell site for only talking about Democrats, I want to acknowledge that there is, of course, a big old fight happening on the Republican side for the soul of that party as well. That's obviously between the MAGA Trumpers and the Never Trumpers, but that's a conversation for another day. And as we've been talking about, the reality in New Mexico is that the action is on the Dem side. So my question is, how do we deal with that reality as journalists? Sean, you and I have been talking about this kind of a lot lately. How do we avoid things like false equivalence? How do we avoid making one thing look bigger so that it equals something else? How do we be honest with our audiences but not partisan when it comes to covering what's increasingly becoming a one-party state?
Yeah, I think that, working with actual truths, the foundation of what those are and establishing what those are, we have to do that. That's just the bare minimum, in fact, that we have to set now as journalists, and has become an expectation with the climate of the sort of fake news that we've survived through, and we're working to continue to fight. I will say that within that, you mentioned the sort of MAGA identity of Republican politics in New Mexico. That coalition is strongly supported by a more grassroots effort of New Mexicans who are giving micro donations of $10, $15, $26 that are similar to what you're seeing with the progressive coalitions, and soliciting funds from just individual people who are not corporate interests, who just want to give money to a candidate. Yep. And that's what's building that coalition too. So it's interesting to see it on both ends play out. But one of the things that I would say within once we establish those truths, now we have to hold powerful accountable. And in New Mexico, that is the progressive politics, that is the progressive policies, that is the Democratic Party. Every single one of our elected officials in the congressional delegation is a member of the Democratic Party. The governor, the entire legislature, all the way down to local levels now. There are some pockets, of course, of Republican-run local places, and that does give us a little insight into some of their policies. Again, back to the environment, places like San Juan County, Curry County, Otero County, heavy oil and gas stuff and heavy Republican spaces. But to me, and I'm curious about how you approach it from there, once we've identified, okay, who's in charge, how do you then now use what you did in your research for looking into campaign filings? How does that help you identify sort of what the policies are from that point?
Yeah, in political reporting, one mantra of mine has always been policy over polls. There is a place for, so-called horse race reporting. People need to know who's ahead, and that is news, But at the same time, I think that we really do, as journalists, need to focus on policy, because we're, writing for our readers and our listeners, our audience, and those are the people affected by policies. And I think that, as a journalist, you really got to stick up for your readers and for your audience, and fight for them, and fight for, transparency around policy.
In New Mexico, right, the policy is coming from the Democrats. And sort of part of what I'm getting at here is I feel like during the session, I read too many stories early in the session about a proposal to bring back the death penalty. That's not going to happen, and my concern is when readers see something like that, that is set down right next to like the paid family and medical leave thing. Like these are two competing proposals that might happen during the course of the legislative session. So that death penalty bill was dead on arrival, not going anywhere, not going to happen. So as journalists, like, I get that someone has proposed this, but what do we do with that?
Yeah, I think we have to understand it from the historical context and lay out, again, the foundation to readers at the very beginning. Hey, this got proposed, this is likely where it's going to go, and it will ultimately seek a fate that it will not pass. But that doesn't mean that that effort's going to completely die. Who knows if that coalition of MAGA Republicans builds up actual support and leadership and then enacts their own policies 10, 15 years down the line. The progressive Democratic power wing we're seeing took generations to build. And so I think it's important for us, and I think it's important for us, that's why we need local journalists here. I'm happy you're here again. I praise to that, because we need to establish our time in being here so we can follow those trends. You know, what we're seeing within the issue of the legislature of power happening between the Democratic Party is something that we've reported on in the past, right? Like you mentioned earlier, John Arthur Smith. You know, everybody's now like, okay, let's go back to that time. I wasn't here for that. Were you here when that element happened? Because that kind of is the moment a lot of people will point to, and it was recent, that kind of led us to where we are now when it comes to this divide of the Democratic fighting in the roundhouse.
Yeah, it was definitely a previous effort at this, and I am terribly sorry to do this. This went by way too fast, as I knew it would. But thanks a ton to both of you fellas for coming in. Yeah.
You can do anything with a Native Studies degree, and I'm proof of that. A lot of our peers from our graduating class are proof of that. We've gone on to law school, nursing. The practicality of this degree knows no boundaries, honestly.
Following a holiday season with a spike in domestic violence reports, the city of Albuquerque established its Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Commission in March 2023. 1 year later, the commission is working on official language for first responders to identify possible dangers for survivors. It's been a busy first 12 months for the group, and senior producer Lou DeVizio asks commission co-chairs Teresa Garcia and Cherie Alipat about their plans for the work ahead.
Teresa Garcia, Cheche Alipat, thank you so much for joining me here on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Now, I'll start with you, Teresa. Your commission began its work now more than a year ago in March 2023. What need was the commission created to fill?
The need that the commission was created to fill is really advocating for survivors within our community, specifically to the city of Albuquerque. And so bringing in community members and organizers as well as lived experience survivors to serve on this board and just advocate on their behalf to the barriers that exist within the city of Albuquerque. And yeah, just support them as much as we can with the resources at the table as well.
Inviting folks from lived experiences and organizations that are passionate to address the gaps and the barriers that are the domestic violence and sexual assault. It's not an easy conversation, but it has to be community-led and it has to be survivor-centered. And I think that's what makes this task force, making it permanent as a commission, having a visible, tangible place for people to be able to actually seek assistance and resources.
Okay. What were some of those gaps and barriers, and are they still, how much more do you need to address them to?
We've seen language barriers, we've seen immigration, we've seen not just the physical abuse that needs to be addressed when it comes to systems and courts, but even addressing restraining orders and having legislation that actually communities can understand and use when it comes to addressing violence. We know that safety is a human right and that violence is something that should not be tolerated in any community or any culture. We also know that it affects across socioeconomic class and race and ethnicity, and it does not, we are not immune as a city to not have to know that we need to address the domestic violence and sexual assault issues in our community.
Right. And you know, the survivors have their own experience. None of them are alike or the same. And so just making sure that as they go through the system, you know, they get the support that they need. It takes 7 to 9 times for a survivor to leave an abusive situation. And when there's gaps and barriers, it prevents them from moving forward, right? And so how do we provide a very supportive process for them, including systems to make sure that they get the support that they need, and there's also safety, because when they leave, it's the most dangerous time for a survivor, right? It's not an easy decision. So I know community sometimes says, right, why don't they just leave if they're in this horrible situation? It's not very easy. There's a lot of factors that play into it. And so this commission is hoping to bridge that and also educate the systems as well in making this process more supportive for the survivor as they, decide to leave, and continue that to also bring safety to their families.
Okay. Now, you mentioned restraining orders. Last May, your group worked to stop a systematic change that would have altered the city's restraining order filing process. Can you describe what the problem was with that, and what was the solution that you all found?
Sure. Yeah, so we had a commission member, Jody Jaramillo from Rape Crisis, come forth and say, hey, there's an issue with wording that's on the restraining order. So it basically stated that it was the survivor's responsibility to serve the restraining order, and some verbiage that caused confusion where maybe the sheriff's office was not going to be able to do that on their behalf. And so this raised huge concern, right? And so we advocated, we talked about it on a commission meeting, and we reached out to Judge Baker at Second Judicial, and within 10 hours, that verbiage was corrected. And so when survivors go and file and obtain the restraining order, it is not their responsibility to serve the restraining order, because that poses a lot of concerns for safety, where that document prevents you from seeing that person. There is the number of yards that you can't be in contact with that person. So giving that responsibility to the survivor to serve it, they're already violating that already. And the danger that comes with it, they're asking and seeking safety to have the restraining order in place. So putting that responsibility on the survivor is very dangerous. And so we corrected it. Second Judicial immediately made those corrections and reached out to survivors that had that prior verbiage to make sure that it was not their responsibility and they felt supported, and also communicated collaboration with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department as well to make sure that they also were aware of it. So it was a really amazing collaborative effort.
And I think commission members do not take their jobs here in the commission lightly. Both organizations and systems alike, and community organizers and advocates, all feel that survivor-centered voices are part of our conversations, and it was brought by a survivor's need, and seeing that barrier and addressing that gap so that systems can bridge that conversation, because we understand that we have that privilege to sit at this table and to have these conversations so that systems can also intervene as needed. Sometimes when legislation puts in policies, we do think about the survivors, we do think about it from the data standpoint, but the stories that are shared in the community based is what gets it to the commission, and where we can have actionable items like having restraining orders, and even having a judge that is just as passionate in this work and who's done her work in the DV domestic matters cases, to be able to address it and immediately do that without further conversations on bureaucracy and administrative stuff.
Now, I understand that the Commission is currently working on something called lethality assessments for the city's first responders when they're going into these situations to help identify potential risks to survivors' lives. What would a first responder be looking for in a situation like that to identify a potentially deadly risk in a home?
Yeah, so lethality assessment is something that I believe is going to be instrumental for survivors and also bridging that gap. We've heard a lot of, there's just been a lot of communication and conversations on the commission and making sure that we are bridging those barriers and those gaps, and this falls into place where I'm a survivor of domestic violence. So I would have really loved to have this document in place at the time, because it's an 11 questionnaire basically, that when they go out to the call, they'll ask the survivor these questions, and they'll basically, they'll ask the survivor these questions and rate them as high risk, medium, or low, okay? But the identifying questions that are needed is to identify if they have experienced strangulation, if there's guns in the home, if have been threatened by a gun. And another item that has not been in the lethality assessment in past is the sexual assault question, if they have experienced sexual assault, or if they were sexually assaulted. But this is a key component because it's creating also a record of what happened, as we talked about earlier, right? It takes 7 to 9 times for a survivor to leave. And so asking those questions, first responders are able to identify how to better support them, connect them to resources, and make sure that they are also provided safety, right? Creating a safety plan. So this is something that we have had very thorough conversations for several months in trying to push it through. And it's something that is needed. And again, to also educate first responders. And that could be law enforcement, the Albuquerque Fire Department, BCSO, not just Albuquerque Police Department, but also the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. So they can identify all of these number of things, right? So then it will result in training, strangulation training. It'll result in more training for sexual assault, and it'll also result in more training to identify guns. As we know, I believe New Mexico was rated 3rd in the nation for gun violence, and there's quite a few homicides that happened last year, and a lot of them were due to domestic violence. So how do we support survivors, right, when they're advocating and saying there's guns in the home and they're not being taken away? And it also goes back to the extreme order of protection red flag law, where if a survivor is advocating, I've been threatened by a gun, there's a gun in the home, and I'm in fear of being killed, officers then the intention is to go to the home and take the guns away. But that currently right now is not happening. And so we need to make sure that we're also working with legislature and legislators in our community to advocate to make sure that if those who are causing harm don't have access to guns, or the guns are being removed to prevent future homicides and protect survivors and their families. There's been a lot of situations last year where an Albuquerque Albuquerque police cadet was murdered. It was a murder-suicide, and so it left their 8-year-old without the mom or the dad, right? So how do we continue protecting survivors? And this lethality assessment, I feel, is the key, and we're doing it at the right time, and advocating and recommending, right? Because the commission works on recommendations to put forth to City Council and the Mayor's office. So we are fiercely recommending to have this lethality assessment in place, where there's 2 lethality assessments currently that we're recommending. It's the MNADV Lab 2.0, so it comes out of Maryland. It's a nationally recognized lethality assessment. And then there's bridging 2 of them, one that currently exists, which is the ODARA. The ODARA focuses more on the lethality of the offender. And then there's the DALE assessment that we're hoping to bridge together to create the lethality assessment, including the strangulation, guns in the home, and sexual assault. And again, this goes back to addressing all of those questions that are sometimes missed and supporting survivors and bridging that gap where they're also connected to services. And so it is a really wraparound, recommendation that we're hoping to have that the city and hopefully City Council will take seriously.
Okay. What will that training look like? And is there a timeline for rolling out these assessments so that it is a continuous part of procedure?
So the danger assessments that we've been still looking into is still being submitted to City Council to look into policy to get it implemented. So as we go through and navigate the conversations regarding organizational structure change, we want to make sure that this also aligns with all of the buy-ins from the system, because we're asking this as a tool and a resource for first responders and advocates alike. It is not just on law enforcement to enforce this. Because of the 11 questions that was thoughtfully and carefully thought by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell, it was the conversation of it's across cultural barriers, across ethnic, socioeconomic barriers to address strangulation, sexual assault, and the idea of gun. I know people would lean into the ODARA, which is the assessment is currently used by APD at this time. ODARA does exist, but ODARA is an Ontario danger risk assessment that does not cover the firearms component. And I think that is where the key part of what we've seen in intimate partner homicide and death reviews, that we've seen in cases, we've seen in the work that we do in the field in the community, is that these 3 factors are a major it increases the risk for homicide, and that's what we're trying to do. It does not change how the courts process work. It does not change how standard operating procedures should change. It should just be an added tool for officers and for first responders, along with community advocates who can implement these tools.
Okay. All right. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and the work that you're doing.
Thank you again, Lou.
Thank you.
Yeah, the persistent childhood poverty narrative in New Mexico is something I'm really interested in. And I think, there's a few issues with that narrative that we need to address. Is we need to talk about it with a lot more nuance and understand how poverty impacts different families in different ways because of historic inequities and oppression that is baked into our systems. And so we know that children of color suffer much greater rates of poverty.
That interview with Gabriela Baez will air in less than 20 minutes. The Native American Studies Department at the University of New Mexico is marking 20 years since it first began offering a Bachelor of Arts degree in Native American Studies. The department celebrated with a symposium this spring on campus in Albuquerque. This week, correspondent Antonia Gonzalez talks with one NAS professor and a graduate of the program about some successes and plans for the future.
Native American Studies has been in existence at UNM for more than 50 years, but students did not start earning degrees until years later. Joining me now to talk about the program and how it's evolved is Native American Studies Chair and Professor, Dr. Tiffany Lee, and graduate of the program, Rebecca Horsechief. Welcome.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. And Tiffany, go ahead and start us off and tell us a little bit about the program.
Yeah, as you said, it's over 50 years old. It started in 1970, really around student activism, students wanting to have their experiences, perspectives, history embedded more in the curriculum. And so Native American Studies was born out of that activism from students. However, it was just sort of a piecemeal program with faculty, teaching. It was actually a student center, more of a student affairs type of organization in the beginning. We didn't get a minor degree until 1999, so many years later, and then became a department only until 2018 when we moved into a new college. But since that time, we have developed several degrees, the bachelor's degree, an online bachelor's degree, a BA to MA shared credit program, the MA, and most recently our PhD program.
And with this milestone being marked this year, what does that mean to you to be celebrating 20 years with the bachelor degree program? Yeah,
it makes me feel like time has really flown so fast. I started in Native American Studies as a postdoc fellow in 2003, and then we got the program approved in 2004, and it's just been, we have over, I think about 135 BA graduates and the same amount of minors, so 270 BA and minor degree graduates out there in the world are moving on, such as Rebecca, fabulous Rebecca, who was really instrumental in helping us get our degree approved at the state legislature.
Well, Rebecca, what drew you to pursue a degree?
I'll tell you what, now that I've been, listened to Tiffany talk, it reminded me that I've actually have been around and knowing about and wanting to be a part of the Native Studies program since I was in high school. I remember when the Native Studies Center was then where the business school is. And of course, some of those centers were torn down to make room for other programs, businesses, buildings. It was then moved to Monte Vista Hall. And so I graduated from high school in 1995, did a summer bridge program, did some of my assignments at the then Native Studies Center, that is where the business school is now, Anderson. And then I graduated with this bridge program, and actually Tiffany was one of my professors through this bridge program between high school and college, and it was all about academic success. And we focused on Native Studies and English and math. So really core subjects and nation building. Some of these concepts were really new at that time. This is before we actually had Native American banks, and that was something we were talking about then. But to answer your question, my experience and my history with Native Studies has been pretty much since high school. And I'm so proud to say that I am a graduate of the University of New Mexico Native American Studies program. And at that time, before it became a degree program, I was able to, through University College, so I'm aging myself now, because there wasn't a degree then, I was able to graduate through University College, and I designed my own degree, which was essentially Native American Studies. But it was power, sovereignty, and self-determination. And through those courses, I was able to take nation building, like federal Indian law, learn about other communities nationally, learn about federal tribal relationships, learn about policies, learn about early instances of activism. Because we were cross-listed with a lot of these tenured track positions, we had professors for film, we had professors for history, we had professors for music. I mean, I really feel like it was an early renaissance for the university, for that department. And we were learning about early instances of indigenous activism, like pre-colonial sort of post-colonial settler sort of instances. For example, people hadn't thought that there were early resistance activities to colonial settlerism. And that's the things we were talking about, and pontificating about, and, having bigger, larger discussions about. And I mean, I could just go on, but I'm still proud of being a graduate of the university, specifically that program, now department. And it's opened so many doors for me personally. And, Tiffany and I met for coffee before we came over here. And one of the things I was like, Dr. Lee, I was like, we have a long history together, but one of the things I can say is that everything that we talked about and how we, oh my gosh, a little emotional, how we engaged in those courses is everything that I'm doing now and who I want to be working with as far as tribes and tribal communities. And I've touched on every one of those areas through self-governance, law, education, and now access to capital. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but
you made me think of, the strength of NAS really is its interdisciplinarity. So we do have tenure lines that are specific just to our department, but the faculty have backgrounds in history. So we look at issues around food sovereignty, around environment, around community building, leadership, language revitalization, just, a whole gamut. But at the core, is really about serving community and doing research that's relevant and important and meaningful, and through a reciprocal relationship as well. So we're really trying to change, I think, what academia is. We're not sitting in the ivory tower anymore. We're really embedded, and all of us in Native American Studies, all of our faculty are Native American, and we all come from the Southwest. So we have a lived experience and relationship and value for doing important work that, serves our communities, and all of our students are the same. They all, their majority are Native American, but I'm really happy that we do get some who are not, because there's a role that a lot of people can play to serve the interests of Native American and Native American communities.
And can you expand on, I know that the students, like Rebecca, are the biggest success of the program. Can you expand on a lot of students, including at the Celebration Symposium you held this spring, talked about using their degrees? Not only are they earning critical thinking skills, writing, career skills, but as Native people, a lot of Native people want to go back and use their education to go serve their communities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions we always get is, what can you do with a Native American Studies degree? And so I try to put that back and reframe it in like, well, what skills have you learned from your degree that you can then apply to a career or to move into graduate school or law school? Because it's not just about the degree. Of course, ours is Native American Studies is a very specific field, but it's the skills that they learn within that degree that they can apply to almost any career that they want. And that's what our students have done. They move into a lot of government careers, tribal government, state, federal government, because that's, the relationship. There's an important and necessary relationship that our tribes have with those three levels of governments that our students can participate in and contribute to, but they also move into nonprofit industries. They go into education. They start their own nonprofits, as you saw at the panel. They move into graduate school, and a lot of students move into law school. So, and I think what they take in those positions when they move into careers and further education is that foundational knowledge of the history of settler colonialism, the impact that's had and that continues to have in our communities, the policies that still, have repercussions, and then how tribes are exercising their own sovereignty and self-determination to transform or create communities that are sustainable and that reflect who they are.
And Rebecca, your thoughts on, listening to Tiffany talk about students and going on and, even working in the grassroots, local level with their communities. What would you tell students who were interested in earning a Native American Studies degree?
I would say it's one of the best degrees that you can have under your belt. You can do anything with a Native Studies degree, and I'm proof of that. A lot of our peers from our graduating class are proof of that. We've gone on to law school, nursing. The practicality of this degree knows no boundaries, honestly. I mean, because when we were students at the university, as Tiffany mentioned, we were advocating, we were doing the research, we were looking at the policies, we were writing the research papers, we were presenting at national conferences. In some instances, some of the things we were doing were really unique to both the university and to our group. It's not unique now, of course, we're old heads, but we started a Native American Studies Indigenous research group, which was pretty profound for us at that time and was really helpful for, going to law school, really helpful for doing the research, really helpful for, being able to make those contacts and collaborating. Collaborating is huge. I can't tell you how important our connections, the connections that were made at the university are also, lifelong and have been so tremendously impactful. Of course, I'm a little biased, but I could say that I keep coming back. And even in my current role, I am the current president of the University of New Mexico Native Alumni Association. So I keep finding ways to come back and be involved and give back to the students and, cheer on the Native Studies program and recruit from their graduates and recruit from the American Indian Student Services cohort as well. So I'm just so thankful. And I think every time I see Dr. Lee, and if we're meeting, whether it's professional or we're meeting personally or we're out socially, I'm always just thanking her for the opportunity to have learned from her, to have had those experiences, and just to be, mingling professionally now. It's everything to me. It's been everything for my profession. I work for the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs right now. So Brian Newland, who's right under Deb Holland, who's our Secretary of the Interior. And I get to work with tribes and tribal communities on, I would say, some of the bigger projects that are on the hot seat with the administration. So like living languages, tribal tourism, access to capital, Indian business incubators, tribal electrification. I mean, I love it. But for the degree, Tiffany and I were talking, I just want to go back a little bit. Tiffany and I were talking at the cafe earlier, and she reminded me that we did some early lobbying at the Capitol. And so it was myself and a couple other student groups, and we went up to Santa Fe. And I didn't really recognize it as that at that time, but afterwards that's exactly what we did. We shared with the legislators the importance of the program to our studies, to our professions, and to our future. And so we went door to door. And I thought that was really impactful, because it's one thing to say, hey, we need funding for the University of New Mexico Native Studies degree, but what does that mean? Who are these students? What are they going to do with it? What are your plans? So that's impactful. It was impactful.
Yeah, that's why I was saying earlier that she was instrumental in really helping us to get our degree approved, because we had to go through this approval process of UNM, but also through the state system, and students being there to advocate on behalf of Native Studies was really, really essential to that getting passed. And I think the promise, the strength and the promise of Native American Studies really is its students, you know, the ones we have now and the alumni, because they really demonstrate, you know, what you can do with a Native Studies degree, but also how transformative that knowledge can be. You know, you can apply it in so many ways if you have that foundational understanding, a critical awareness, and you know, you're in tune with, you know, how the current socio-political environmental context is affecting your community, then you kind of know how to address that and how to educate others about it. So it was great that that panel that you came to earlier celebrating the 20th, we had one of the panelists who was saying, you know, she's learned, you know, a lot of issues that come up in her work now. She thinks back to her when she was in NAS, and she was saying, there's a class for that. And we're like, that's such a great logo. We need to put it on a t-shirt, because every issue, there was a class that addressed that issue or that you know, topic in one of the classes.
Well, looking towards the future, I'll ask both of you. Rebecca, go ahead and go first. What do you hope Native American Studies looks like at UNM in the next 20 years?
Oh, it's going to be amazing. They're going to have their own building. There's going to be even more, you know, faculty and adjunct faculty and assistants and support. There's going to be, it's going to be an expanded program. I'm hoping that the state will continue to fund it, meet it at its level of need, and that there will be all the other like philanthropic, you know, interests that are participating as well. And I hope that alumni can, you know, engage to give back in a meaningful way too. So there's really it knows no boundaries other than, you know, it just people stop showing up to work, which I doubt is going to happen. I mean, really, think about the international collaborations too, which is what they're excellent at as well. So I'll leave it at that.
And Tiffany?
Well, in 20 years, I should be retired. But no, there's, as Rebecca said, we already have grown so significantly since in the last 20 years, but really in the last 10 years. And I really see how now that we have a PhD program all the way, you know, down to the BA and a minor degree, just the breadth of what our students can do in the communities. And I see that I'm hoping, and that's what we're working towards now, is really developing and building stronger long-term collaborations and relationships with communities, and that's organizations as well, to really create impactful change through research and through teaching and through service.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here today, and congrats on the 20-year anniversary.
Thank you so much.
Earlier this month, ACLU board member Gabrielle Ubaez began her new job as Executive Director of New Mexico Voices for Children, a nonprofit that has helped low-income children and families for more than 30 years. Child poverty has plagued New Mexico for years. It's a complex issue, and during her conversation this week with correspondent Russell Contreras, Ubaez talks about searching for new solutions and why she wanted to take this issue on.
Gabrielle Ubaez, thank you for joining us here at New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you for having me, Russell.
So, New Mexico Voices for Children, they have this annual Kids Count report. It monitors our child poverty annually. While there are some positive signs about improving families with, say, high school diplomas, we still rank near the bottom in many categories. What are we getting wrong here?
Thank you for that question, Russell. I think that the Kids Count report doesn't tell us a full story, and it tells us a very important part of the story at the same time. So our most recent Kids Count data showed that 24% of children in New Mexico are still living in poverty. And that's down from 31% 10 years ago. So we're making great strides, and what we measure matters. At Voices, we like to nerd out about policy and the way that we look at data, and there are other ways to look at where New Mexico is in terms of poverty for children. One of those ways is the supplemental poverty measure, and when we look at that, we're actually at 10%, and that's because of the really robust income support programs that our state has enacted recently.
Income support programs, nerding out, love this, but we often hear critics of reports like these say, oh, let's not compare New Mexico to other states. let's just dismiss the data. What are the dangers when we say that? Let's just dismiss the data. New Mexico is so unique. We don't need to compare ourselves to Connecticut or Massachusetts. Are there any dangers in that?
I don't think there are dangers in that specifically, and I don't see the value in saying, okay, we're 50th. I think we need to look at the individual data sets and understand sort of what policies and systems are resulting in those outcomes, and look at them both in discrete ways but in interconnected ways. And so we need to understand that we're competing against ourselves, and there are other things we can measure that show us where we're making positive impact.
We often ask the educational system to fix everything when we're not dealing with poverty. What should we be doing to address the poverty and child well-being when that could fix the educational system? See, it's the other way around. Is there anything we need to be thinking about holistically there?
Yeah, the persistent childhood poverty narrative in New Mexico is something I'm really interested in. And I think, there's a few issues with that narrative that we need to address. Is we need to talk about it with a lot more nuance, and understand how poverty impacts different families in different ways because of historic inequities and oppression that is baked into our systems. And so we know that children of color suffer much greater rates of poverty. I think Hispanic children are at 27%, Black children in New Mexico 29%, Native children 39%. And so we need to understand how race plays into inequities that result in poverty. At the same time, in New Mexico, our goal should be 0 children living in poverty, and 14% of white children also are living in poverty in New Mexico. The other thing I'd like to say is when we look at the deficit-based data, some people are very rightfully frustrated and think that we're saying New Mexico is bad or New Mexicans are bad. Absolutely not. We believe that systems that have existed for a really long time are resulting in these persistent poverty rates. And the good news is we have the power to change them. And so what I'm really proud of is, especially in the last decade, New Mexico has made great strides in those income support programs that I talked about that has reduced our supplemental poverty rate to 10%. So New Mexico families are doing much better, and we have results to show for it, and so we should keep investing in those programs.
You make a good point. Let's look at some other data rather than the data that we run to, say, the lunch programs and so forth. What other data should we be pulling out and looking at that tells us a different story that would kind of change the way we look at things? Is there anything you can point to say we should be focusing on that?
I don't know exactly what other data we should be looking at in terms of people, but what I will say is we should also start collecting data that focuses on systems. And so not how are New Mexicans doing as the only thing we look at, but how are systems serving people, how are they reaching people, and how are those systems impacting their lives? So let's judge the systems a little more and compare that to where people are ending up as a result of them.
So that you wouldn't put the blame on the people, you're saying, wait a minute, you have to consider the systems.
Yeah, we never put the blame on the people. It's the systems that we have the power to change. And that's the good news, right? We create the systems, we can reimagine them too.
That's a good point, but how can we measure those systems? Because we could go a lot of different. You can measure the school districts, measure agencies. What could we do to measure some of those?
Yeah, so New Mexico Voices for Children has this reputation as a tax and budget policy organization, which I really love. It's very nerdy, and it's maybe something that people don't immediately care or think about when they think about improving New Mexico. But that's a big one, right? Addressing wealth inequality and who pays into the system and how is a big part of what we should measure. And New Mexico is doing really great there. I don't know if you've heard this stat, but we're in the top 10 in the nation for the most fair and progressive tax policies, and we actually are the most improved in the nation. And so those who are making and earning the least are not paying the most anymore, and those who are very well off and wealthy are paying more into the systems that benefit us all. And so that's one example of where we can measure our systems for impact.
Since the 1960s, efforts to fight inequality is centered around anti-poverty initiatives. But there's a new movement let's start talking about building wealth, financial literacy. Where do you come out on that?
So that's my jam. My background is in wealth building. I want to be very clear that I don't think the discussion should ever be, should we focus on poverty alleviation or wealth building? It's and. We need them both. Wealth building, the difference is that it's not just about meeting people's immediate needs so they can survive, but it's about giving them the infrastructure and dignity to make their own decisions. What that looks like in policy are things like baby bonds, access to affordable credit, free college tuition, access to affordable childcare, and things that allow people to build financial stability and advance their lives on their own terms with support from our state government. And so this is not bootstraps, right? This is how do we use state government to give people dignity in making their own financial decisions that improve their lives.
Now, you're from the South Valley. You're a product of the South Valley, and yet you went to college out of state. Yeah. What are we missing to give other South Valley young women like yourself the same resources to think about higher education in other states? Because when folks say, you got lucky, you get into a program, right? The world was helped you out some ways. But that's not how it works. How could we talk to some of those other South Valley girls today and say, no, you can follow in Gabrielle's footsteps and go to school in California or think about Yale? What are we doing?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I will proudly claim the South Valley. My parents are from Rio Grande High School. I actually went to Valley High School, so I was a North Valley kid, but Valley girl through and through. Similar experience, you know, going to an Albuquerque public school, and I think dreaming bigger than maybe some of the people around me thought was possible. Part of it was luck, but not dumb luck. It was the adults around me creating things that set me up for success. A big thing in my life was an after-school and summer program I went to called Working Classroom. It's an organization that's still around. It's been around for I think almost 40 years now, and it's where we spent our summers and afternoons being critical thinkers. At 17, we were talking about things like predatory lending, which is hilarious to me, like what 17-year-old knows that term? And that just really got us involved in the community through arts and social justice and collaboration.
You have 3 small children, as I do. I have 2. And you choose to live here in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, and you can go anywhere else, but why do you stay here?
This is home. I mean, we love New Mexico. We love the people here. And I know that both my husband and I really feel like we owe our hearts and our labor and our vision and our willingness to collaborate with others to make New Mexico the best place to be a kid, because it's the best place to be a teacher, a doctor, a care worker. That's how we get to make New Mexico the best place to be a kid.
Gabrielle Baez, Executive Director of New Mexico Voices for Children, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Russell.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the viewers like you.